All right, can I have the roll call, please?
Gibson. Kapler.
Here.
Ormsby. Satterfield.
Here.
Scaife.
Here.
Stoltenberg.
Here.
Wendland.
Here. All right, we had minutes from the meeting of May 21st, 2025. Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of the May 21st, 2025 minutes as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from May 21st, 2025. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Okay, the minutes are approved. Good evening and welcome everyone to the Plan and Zone Commission meeting for June 18th, 2025. We are a recommending body appointed by the mayor and the city council to review site plans, zoning rezonings, land use, things of that nature. So we have two cases tonight. If you have input for the case, I'll ask you to step back when I recognize the audience to the podium to my right and to your left and tell us your name, and then we'd love to hear about what you have for input on the case. So with that, Greg, we will begin.
Mr. Chairman, our first case involves a rezoning at 5680 North Street from A2 Rural Residence District to R1 Single Family Residence District. The item essentially concerns Lot 5 of Bailey's First Edition. The petitioners are Jonathan and Stephanie Bettendorf. All right, I should say Bettendorf. The current occupation of the site is by one single-family dwelling. Current land use in the area is primarily neighborhood light throughout, and it surrounds the entirety of the lot of record. R1 single-family residence is permitted under neighborhood light future land use designations, and the surrounding zoning is A2 on the north, south, and west sides of the parcel. Across the way on Monks Road, R1 zoning is found. R1 zoning is typically selected once a parcel has access to water and sanitary sewer. And some of these areas are interspersed here when they were brought in back in the late 60s, early 70s. Some still have a lack of access to sanitary or water. This is a 1 acre parcel, and under the R1 zoning standards, the petitioner, as his intent is to subdivide the property, would have to provide R1 lot sizes at a minimum of 10,000 square feet, 70 feet in width with 30-foot setbacks, front and rear yard. It involves, again, Lot 5 of Bailey's First Edition shall be replatted using the zoning of R1, and the replatting shall only be permitted after City Council has approved the rezoning. Thoroughfare and access primarily is North Street right here coming off of Monks Road. And as it already does access, as you see a driveway up to the petitioner's home, this will be maintained North Street as the primary access to the remainder of this parcel. Utility connections are found on the eastern portion of Lot 5, as they're already in place, coming primarily from Monks Road right-of-way. Additional easements to accommodate utilities and potentially subdivide portions of the lot should be brought through the entirety of this parcel up to the adjoining property lines, and that'll be something that will be evaluated during the replatting process as staff goes through that. A 6-foot sidewalk is present currently here along Monks Road. There are no sidewalks along this parcel as this was platted in 1962. And there were no standards at the time for sidewalks during that time while this was county land. And staff will make any determinations necessary as to if there needs to be additional sidewalk type of provisions. All parking will be done on site, and that will have to be accommodated on each lot for each of these particular lots of record. Staff, in going through the test, sees that it meets goal 4 of the housing, that is expanding housing choices and strengthening neighborhoods, found in the goals and plans organization segment of the comprehensive plan. The neighborhood light future land use designation permits the R1 zoning, and that is the first of the test that needs to be essentially complied with. Expanding housing choices and strengthening neighborhoods is also part of this amendment process in compliance with the comprehensive plan. The third step is, as I mentioned before, these first two steps, so that there don't have to be any additional amendments being made in regards to complying with the test. The parcel's use is consistent with newer subdivisions to the east. The A2 zoning that borders this parcel was meant to be transitional to accommodate parts of the county that the city incorporated in the 60s and 70s. And now that we see that the water service and sanitary is available to this parcel, that facilitates one of the rezoning tests. All structures anticipated for any future lot expansion would have the same single-family dwelling use classification. All driveway accesses would be from North Street and would not create more drive entries onto Monks Road. No externalities differing from those created by single-family housing are anticipated for this area. The sixth step of this test, newer subdivisions in this part of Bettendorf have been zoned R1, single-family residence district, or R2, single-family residence district. So there is a precedent that has been established for single-family housing that is not zoned in the A2 designation. And also the proposed amendment is in the public interest and not solely in the interest of the applicant. Infill development requires little, if any, additional utility connections or infrastructure improvements, and the tax base shall be increased as a result of further subdivision. Staff would say, is in recommending approval, given the compliance with the 7-step test, that there be a condition that any future plat must comply with all zoning requirements for the R1 single-family residence district. The replat will not be considered by the city council until after the third reading of the ordinance rezoning the property as approved. I would ask, are there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. Mark, anything since presentation or publication? No. Okay. Questions and comments from the commission, please.
I have a couple.
Ann, let's go.
All right. Greg, we have an acre lot. We know that there's a minimum for a single-family lot if this is replatted. How many lots would you estimate could be incorporated here?
Well, that would be up to what the petitioner would want to do, and also for the layout of the utilities and the like. There'll at least be 2 lots, the one for the existing structure, and then also for the one he anticipates, I think, adding. But that, again, is up to what can be accommodated. It's one thing to say per the square footage and the like, but there is a terrain issue here as well. It's rather steep, and there are other things to consider.
Okay.
So we can at least say there will be 2 lots as a result of the replatting.
2 including the existing lot.
Well,
Or 2
one, but there
additional
could
for a
be,
two-
there's potential for 3 overall lots,
Okay.
one might say. But again, that is contingent upon the way the utilities might be laid out.
Okay.
And other factors.
Okay. And then talk to me a little bit about North Street. It sounds like maybe it's not city standard street, or,
Well, the
You
city
wanna-
engineer.
I will take that one.
okay,
So we worked, this probably took over a year, actually with the applicant, working back and forth, trying to go back through the history of the platting of the adjacent subdivisions, including his lot. You know, some of the subdivision plats basically aren't legible at this point, but we do believe, and we have talked to city attorney, myself and another assistant city engineer, worked through it, and we do believe the intent during one of the replats was that this would become a public street. Now, essentially, it's an alley, because you're looking at, you know, a 20, maybe 30 foot, I'd have to measure it, right away. It's not a standard 31 foot back by any means. But we have acknowledged at this point that the city will own it and maintain it going forward. We actually did some work on it, probably 5 years ago, in conjunction with Panorama Park. So Panorama Park only has 2 means of ingress egress for the entire area. They have Park Drive or Park Avenue heading to the south, and then North Street heading east. 4 or 5 years ago, they had to close Park to do some sewer work, and North Street at that point was impassable because we were considering it a private street. We did it for emergency services purposes, to be able to get the residents out after working with the applicant. He did actually happens to be a land surveyor and had done a lot of the research for us. We did some on our end, and we came to the conclusion that we are gonna take over ownership and maintenance of it. But it will not be brought up to any type of city standard. You know, at some point in the near future, we'll do some maintenance on it. Basically, it'll stay seal coat, you know, maybe get an asphalt surface on it at some point.
And that will happen regardless of the outcome of this case?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, for an infill development, we would not make improvements be required.
Is it connectable on the other end?
It is. It's actually in better shape on the other end,
Okay,
which is really kind of the impetus for the fact that we believe it was always meant to be public. It's seal coat. Panorama Park has acknowledged it for as long as we know. They take care of that section of it. So it really didn't make sense, if you think back to our private drive discussions we've had, that you would have a piece of a private drive that connects yet again to city streets on either end.
right.
Let alone half of a road that is public and half is private.
Interesting.
It has
All
been.
right, yeah. All right, thank you.
Just a footnote to that question, maybe if it were improved in better condition, would it carry likely more traffic, or is it just the local
It's just
homes
the local.
adjacent?
Yep. I think you may have some now that, because there is some potholes popping back up, and the fact that it's just gravel with a single shot of oil to try to keep the dust down, that are avoiding it now, but you're never gonna get cut through traffic. It doesn't go anywhere.
Doesn't, right, okay.
Yep, just runs into Panorama Park.
I can see that we'd have a lot more questions when we get to a plat kind of discussion.
Right.
But for the scope of the rezone in here, any other questions and comments? Nope. All right, anyone in the audience with regard to this? Oh, I got to do the public hearing first. Sorry. Procedural. We have to open and close the public hearing relative to this case because it is a rezone. So is there proof of publication?
Yes, there is.
All right, thank you. There's proof of publication. I will therefore open the public hearing and ask for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment with regard to this? Yes, ma'am. Please go back to the podium if you would.
I'm Wendy Reyes, and I'm at 5615 North Street. And I've lived in that house for almost 30 years. And I've seen the evolution of that street for a very long time. And I've actually come to the city multiple times when Wally Mook was with the city and was told, no, can't do it, private property, can't change it, can't fix it, whatever. Anyway, I'm glad to hear that the city's taking over, maintaining it. Are you going to maintain the other end too that hooks up with Panorama Park?
Yes, we'll maintain everything that's within Bettendorf city limits.
Okay,
So once you get into Panorama Park, we will not. That's still their responsibility.
okay. And also, when the den boards add the extra plats and have homeowners on there, that'll be more traffic then too. And I would like to correct you in that the fact that people do use it as a throughway. My front living room window faces the street, and there are people on that road all the time. And I'm sure that Mr. Denborg can attest to that fact too. It is a publicly used street. So I think the upkeep is probably needs to be done as soon as possible because it's starting to get big holes in it again.
Sure.
So that would be much appreciated. And then with extra homes being built on it, then that'll be even more traffic. So, but I just wanted to let you know my history with the street. I mean, we appreciate that you're taking it over. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it. Anyone else in the audience with regard to this? No, if that's it, I will close the public hearing. Any other discussions and questions by the commission? Nope, then I ask for a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve case number 25-024, subject to the staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve case 25-246. Can we have a roll call on the motion, please?
Kapler,
Yes.
Satterfield,
Yes.
Scaife,
Yes.
Stoltenberg,
Yes.
Wendland.
Yes. All right, thank you. 25-024 is recommended for approval, which will take us to case 25-025.
Mr. Chairman, this is application for 3469 Middle Road, west of Devil's Glen Road and south of Middle Road. It's was used primarily as a convenience store filling station, or if you will. The applicant is Seven Brew Iowa LLC, and it is Lot 1 of Rules 4th Edition. And the request is for a site development plan for 2 buildings, one for a drive-through coffee house, and the other one essentially is a storage building associated with that drive-through restaurant. And the applicant wishes to demolish the structure. Now, what you can see is this site is heavily laden with the future land use designation of community commercial. And that is true throughout the entirety of this area. It's surrounding the entirety of the parcel is in that designation. C2 community commercial district zoning, which permits this particular use, is found throughout the area, and there is some C3 also found southeast and south of the particular area in the zoning classification surrounding this site, but it is heavily, intensely commercial, and it has been as such for a number of decades. Goal 3 of the economic development is to attract and retain business, and that's what is being attempted here by the removal of the current use and replacement as proposed by this coffee shop. This is the original plat right here showing 0.716 acres of Rules 4th Edition, and showing it as a corner lot. The adjoining property has an easement that is here for access, and this is Walgreens' location right here, and this access easement will play a large role, or has done so, in providing access to a portion of this site. This is the original site development plan that showed the building, the tanks, and formerly a car wash on site, and then the stationed areas here for fueling of vehicles. This was approved in 1987, and at such time, the paving was placed in here so that it pretty much established a 15-foot setback, which will be in play for the new design because it is grandfathered in as such as a hard surface. Part of what is being done is the removal of the fuel systems, which means the storage tanks, piping, pumps, and any other infrastructure, and that is per the Iowa DNR, and that will be accomplished before there will be the issuance of any building permits. What we have here is the demo plan showing removing of the paving, the structure, and then this overhead electrical connection, and then some other utilities before we get to this stage, which we have the 2 structures, the coffee service here, the storage building here. We have 2 lanes of traffic to serve right here through the drive-through. The structure here for the coffee service area will be 520 square feet, 247 square feet for the storage building. And this will give you an idea of how this structure will look. And these are the elevations showing the 7 Brew design. Thoroughfare and access plan. Again, these are guaranteed accesses at the present. There may be a tapering of this access for entry here for redesign, but that is contingent upon a traffic study, which will be conducted prior to City Council consideration of this agenda item as it might come before them. As you can see, the current accesses we have here are rather wide access that doesn't quite match up with the access across the street that goes into the Hy-Vee and strip mall areas over here, and then an existing full access here off of Devil's Glen Road that comes in. These are accesses that were designed back in the 1980s with a totally different number of traffic counts, vehicle traffic counts, and then different design standards primarily. There's a 1-inch water supply coming in from the north to feed for utilities, and then a 6-inch sanitary sewer main also directed north from this site. Electrical service will come in now through a transformer, will no longer be overhead and will feed into the coffee shop. And the natural gas shall be supplied from the north. And this is the pedestrian trail and access way. You have a 10-foot trail here, 4-foot sidewalk here, and continuation of a 10-foot trail on this side of Devil's Glen Road. And then there are other wide sidewalks on the north side of Middle Road. Parking is provided, 6 spaces are required. There are 9, including an ADA approved space. And then there will be about 7 vehicular areas here in the stacking in each lane. Stormwater detention is grandfathered at this point, and we will see the sheet flowing of water to certain areas off the site, pretty much as it is now. And the landscaping is such that we will have 4 tree factors here along Middle Road, and then 4 placed along Devil's Glen Road, and then there will be 2 types of conifers, I should say here, and then here for a total of 4, as those are only regarded as 1/2 tree factors. Lighting shall be required to be downcast. Staff, in looking at this, recommends approval based on the fact that it does meet the goal of economic development to attract and retain businesses. And then also the addition of a traffic impact study shall be conducted by a professional engineer to evaluate anticipated level of service for both access points on the site. And then this will identify any potential safety concerns as well as any anticipated average delays for turning movements, entering and exiting the site. And this study shall be reviewed and approved by the city engineer prior to consideration by city council of the development. And then also, if need be, a revised site plan shall be submitted detailing reconfigured entrance off of Middle Road, and that would come before this body. I would ask, are there any questions?
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Mark, anything since presentation and publication?
Just to clarify that I checked with Assistant Chief Lawson about the tank removal, and that's correct. Those tanks are all coming out, so.
Okay. Questions and comments from the commission, please? Yeah.
Maybe you'd expound on traffic studies, how long they normally take, and just can expand a little bit about what all is involved in a traffic study.
I would submit that question to our city engineer.
Yeah, they can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, generally speaking, for a site this size. We've already talked through with the consultant engineer who's going to do the work, so they understand what we're looking at. In this particular case, all we are evaluating, our only concern is those 2 entrances. So a site this size is not going to, for example, generate volumes of traffic that would require you adding a turn lane or adding through lanes on Middle Road or Devil's Glen. It's just not. It's going to be a drop in the bucket when you take it to consideration. You're at probably close to 20,000 cars a day through that intersection, maybe even 30 through the intersection. You're at about 20,000 north of there on Devil's Glen. That's one of our busiest stretches in the city. So I would guess somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks, but I can't be certain on that. What we're looking to have evaluated is essentially the safety and the level of service at those 2 intersections to make sure that there's not going to be any additional concerns. So if you think about when the gas station was probably built, the traffic on Middle Road might have been half of what it is. Now, the traffic through the gas station at that time versus what's been there over the last 10 years, was greatly decreased, but the traffic on Middle Road increased. So, we've had some change in conditions, so we want to evaluate that. We do like the stacking and the queuing on the site. You do have both entrances, so you can go out either direction. And then one of the conditions that Greg had spoke, the applicant's willing to help us narrow that entrance on their, at least the portion that they have control of on their property. I can't unfortunately go back and fix everything that was done over the years. I can promise you, you'll never see a 70-foot wide apron get built in the city again. That's what this has now. They own about 12, 13 feet of it, and they're willing to remove that section since they have the access easement through Walgreens, which we have the ability to ask for now because there's a change of use. Maybe we'll be able to work with Walgreens in the future to help try to narrow that, try to get it to just more of a standard 3-lane, 40-foot wide configuration, but this is at least a start to it.
Thank you.
Can I piggyback with another question for Brett?
Please.
We've had cases where we required a right-in, right-out. Would the traffic study dictate that or support that or say it's not necessary?
If the study came back and said that we would have a significant safety concern with the generated traffic from the trip generation, we could have to look at that. I went back and actually just pulled up the last 5 years worth of crash history, excuse me, in that general vicinity that gets reported to the DOT. Kind of very surprisingly, you've got 5 accidents in 5 years that have been reported in that
Really?
immediate vicinity.
I'm surprised.
And our police are very good, I can promise you. They report everything through that because it's a great tool that's used statewide. It's the basis for traffic studies done across the state. It's called the ICAT tool.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, depending on time of day, people have kind of gotten used to if they're not comfortable trying to make a left out of there,
Cut
they're going to
through
go a
there.
different direction.
Yeah, people cut through there as well.
Yeah.
When the
From middle
traffic's
on
backed
to
up.
Devil's Glen, yeah.
Yeah,
Which narrowing it would help that because right now it gives that appearance that it's very easy to
easy.
get through.
yeah.
Much
But
less like.
The
May I ask
peti-
one more
Yeah, no,
question?
go ahead, I'm sorry. Drop.
So because the tanks are being pulled, all that paving has to be removed, or a lot of it. Has there been any consideration to less paving, to not have not so much water runoff?
So I probably should correct kind of something that Greg said a little bit is they're not grandfathered. They actually do have a net reduction in impervious surface. That's why it did not trigger any additional stormwater detention.
Okay,
So if you have less in the proposed condition, you don't need detention. You only have to detain for the increase. They do have less with the proposed site.
okay.
So if we're only 2 to 4 weeks away from a traffic study, and typically we would see a traffic study, so we could look at it in conjunction with the site plan that's proposed, why don't we have those two lined up together?
Because it was a late addition on our end, so we're providing a measure to try to keep them moving along with their schedule. Yeah, there was some confusion on our end between planning and engineering on what was required, and it did not get to them in a timely manner.
I can see why we would ask for it, because notwithstanding the 5 accidents, which the data is the data, but the feel as a driver, that is one of the worst places to go in and out of in the city, just because it's so wide, to state the obvious, and my concern is that the petitioners only got 10 to 13 feet of control, and the rest of that wide intersection is controlled by a third party that we have no
Remains.
control over. So even if the traffic study does come back and say, you got to do something to fix it, we've only got 10 or 13 feet to deal with, how do we fix it? And just footnote on that, I noticed in the original site plan that it looks like there was a 6-inch raised island at one point, which I'm sure is long gone, but that would be a disaster
Yeah.
out there. But to Ann's point, some kind of right in, right out, you get high school kids running on, track down that pathway. There's a lot of bikes that go through there. I just see that as a really, and I know when you try and turn left out of there to go south on Middle Road, certain times of the day, disasters, people will stop for you and let you through, and then people are going 35 to 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's.
And the
it's
other
tricky.
lane, it's just-
It's access management 101 and things that we
Big
would
time.
not do
Not
now.
do.
But we
Yeah.
can't go back and correct
And
everything.
I get
unfortunately.
that, but I kind of feel like we're saying, okay, we want you to consider approving this, but we're not giving you all the information yet, but when we get the information, then staff's gonna
At that
look
point,
at,
it's up to us to make
It's
sure
up
we
to
convey
you.
that to city council. And I can tell you, having done this long enough, and looking at the site and how much traffic it's gonna generate, if you did trip generation for a coffee shop by the book and a trip generation for a gas station, they're not much different. So anecdotally, we're so skewed by the years of Atomic Coffee. And we've talked about this
True.
with every
Yeah,
coffee shop
true.
that's ever gone through. That's all we can think of is that 24/7, they are piling out into the street. And it's just not really the case with them anymore. And no matter what we might see occasionally, that traffic study has to use accepted standards nationwide, which I can tell you, the trip generation, which it's built off of, so it's gonna tell you X square foot of coffee shop on an X square foot lot is gonna generate X number of cars per hour. That versus a gas station is not gonna be much different. So the numbers most likely are not gonna tell you anything, and that safety history that we've already kind of done
Okay.
on our own, I highly doubt anything's gonna come out of it, but because of the nature of it, I can't do that myself. You know, I have to have an independent consulting professional engineer do that work.
Verify.
But I'm telling you, as, as your city engineer, you're not gonna see anything come out of it that's gonna force
That's the
a right
reality
in,
of
right
it.
out, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
So that's why, in our opinions, it was okay to let it get through planning and zoning, but, you know, hold it for before council consideration. And obviously, we would adjust our staff report accordingly.
Okay.
I maybe to split the baby a little bit, if it did come back with, you know, a shocking revelation that we need to change the site tremendously, I think staff would then bring it back to P and Z.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we would absolutely support that.
If it comes to what we kind of believe is the likely outcome with very little change, if any, then I think it could proceed to council. But I feel the commission here trying to go, hey, we don't have all the details and you're asking us to make a vote.
That's kind of,
And you
Nice
don't like that,
paraphrase
right?
of it,
You don't-
yeah.
You don't like that, and you don't have to like it, the vote is yours. You can, you know, ask staff to return it back to you if we get a significant change of site plan, which I think is pretty much the way our code would read anyway. And that would maybe alleviate the concern you have of not having that traffic study with the project, because we usually have it with the project.
right.
You know, that's how it comes to you. So I understand the concern, and yeah, I think the choice is yours on that. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you could delay this project. It would be a motion to postpone, is what our city attorney would say, or you could accept it with the recommendation that it has the traffic study done. And if that traffic study does provide a significant change to site plan, it would have to come back to this body before it went to city council.
And you're going right where my head's been on this. And then the reality check, the real world, in Brett's answer is, hey, it's unlikely that it's gonna have some kind of data that's gonna trip something that's gonna change it. And then the next step of reality is we have 10 or 13 feet to fix it with. And if there's something to fix in that, well, I'll ask it as a question. Is there something you would do today that we would change this in that 10 or 13 feet other than narrowing it at 10 or 13 feet?
Exactly. I would do what I've already asked them to do, and that is to, originally when they came in, they were just gonna use the existing entrance. One of the conditions we put on this was to look at narrowing it, and they did narrow it, so that's
So
exactly
this what we're seeing is
is
the narrow.
update, yes, yep. That was that last condition. We just didn't have when I wrote that and it went out, that condition, we didn't have an updated full site plan. I just had an exhibit. So that was based off
Okay.
there. We do have it now.
Okay.
One little thing, any chance that sidewalk heading north could be straightened so it's not like right on the street?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes, sir. Let me open the aerial. Regret.
He's looking at it on Google Earth and at Street View, and the sidewalk is right at the curb.
It's right next to the street.
It's tight there.
Looks like there might be some utilities right in the way, but
Loop it
Just that
inside a little bit,
line.
but you still have to have wherever is there a crosswalk? on-
Yes, sir.
crosses
Yeah.
over
Yeah,
here.
There's a signal there.
And you got the signal.
Take it inside this power line instead. Yeah, if there were. That's a good point.
It's just worth asking. I don't like sidewalks that are right on the street.
In general, I can give that a look as part of our sidewalk program to see if there's something we can do with it.
Just to move it back from the street.
Snow wouldn't be plowed on top of it and all kinds of things. So, yeah, that's a good, you're a smart guy. Yeah, good.
One
right,
more
well,
year,
that-
one
that-
more year.
One more year. Anyone else with regard to this?
I got a question, probably more just comment than anything. When the tanks are removed, is there any remediation requirement for the fill that's adjacent to it, or is it all dependent upon testing and what comes back if there's any contamination
They haven't done the testing yet. I think they would have to do the testing as part of their
as they're
environmental.
doing the demo? Okay.
That's all. I think that's in that DNR letter, so
Anyone else in,
on phase 2.
we should know? Anyone in the audience with regard to this matter? Yeah, please. Yeah. Don't you want to be on TV?
I guess.
You don't have a choice.
Well, I'm Nathan Hastings. I'm with Seven Brew Iowa, so I'm the operator here for the state.
Okay,
You guys have discussed a lot of the potential interesting pieces to this lot, but I just wanted to share with you guys kind of who we are and what we do. So we are a coffee shop. We'll be looking to hire probably 30 to 50 employees in the usually young adult age range. We serve coffee and kindness. That's what we do. We've been pretty, I'd say, cooperative with the city engineering team to try to see if we could help with this access, because it is a little interesting. But I think that our use will be definitely an improvement for you guys, and we were just happy to be in the area. So.
yeah, I appreciate it. I like the looks of your building. It's got nice elevation and curb appeal. While I've got you there, I got a couple of operational questions. So you've got a double drive-through. From a practical standpoint, does the employees carry out to the outside lane for delivery?
Yeah, so one thing I guess I didn't mention is it's similar to a Chick-fil-A drive-through model. So
Yep.
we have outside order taking with like an iPad and all that. And so they'll take the order wherever the queue is at on the line, all the way
Yep.
back to the back car. And then we'll run that order out or at the front part of that building where it's kind of flush with the
Yep.
drive lane, so.
Okay, so they will cross kind of a lane of inside traffic there to, just like,
Correct,
okay.
correct. But we have significant signage that says like, and we call our baristas brewistas because it's Seven Brew. So we have like barista crossing, and then it's checkered, and we try to be very
Okay.
safe. So
One other note from, and Greg, can you put up the landscape plan, the last slide we had, I think it was? Yeah, right there. In fact, those two right there, I don't know how big they will get, but if you've got cars coming in and around as the cut through and everything, and you've got cars that are going to pull out of your queue, if you've got anything of any height, those two bushes there are gonna block the visibility of the cars to the left. They won't see cars coming. And just, if we could figure out some of the way to put the landscaping requirement in, but not obscure a field or site view of oncoming traffic or outflowing traffic, as cars come in and come around there and the other one's coming and they can't see it. Just a thought, that's minor, but
that's a great point. We typically just adhere to whatever the city and local regulations are for total counts of, shrubbery
Sure.
trees or whatever on property. Our operational kind of preference would be to have less a lot of times because of those exact reasons.
You
So
bet.
we're happy to work and to move those and,
Yep.
or just to keep them trimmed, so.
great, thank you, appreciate it.
I have another question.
Yeah.
You mentioned Iowa. Tell us about your brand. Where are you located? How widely spread are you?
Yeah, so this is a national brand. I think we're in about 25 states now. Like I mentioned, I'm the operator for the state of Iowa. Here in Iowa, this would be, we've got 5 stores open now, working on opening our 6th. So, and then nationwide, there's about 400 stores open. So,
Okay,
yeah, originated out of Northwest Arkansas, kind of close to the Walmart home office in Fayetteville, Rogers, Bentonville, if you're familiar with that area. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Anyone else? Anyone else in the audience with regard to this matter? All right, we'll come back to the commission.
I guess before I make any kind of a motion, do we want to include any language in our motion about the traffic study?
It's
I can suggest, to Mark's point, you've done similar things in the past where you
Yep.
could put basically make it contingent upon no major implications or some wording of that coming out of the traffic study. That way, if something does, that would automatically kind of trigger it to come back.
I think you might have a terminology like if the traffic study doesn't require material changes to the site
Material,
design as presented, it would move on to council. If the changes recommended by the traffic study were material, it would come
Then it
back.
would come
to this
back here.
It'd come
board.
back
I think
anyway.
our code would say as well, but I think
Yeah.
you could certainly
Right.
put that in your motion.
Directionally, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you get that, Lisa? Okay, so moved.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second, subject to staff recommendations and the emphasis on the information generated from the traffic study yet to be completed, that we approve case 25-025. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Case 25-025 is recommended for approval. All right. That would take us to the zoning ordinance update.
Mr. Chairman, while Taylor's getting set up, I just want to thank everybody that took the time to meet with me individually. I have taken some notes on different things, a lot of good feedback, a lot of positive feedback for the team here, and so we appreciate that. And I've had enjoyed working with you all. So those of you that did take some extra time to have that meeting, thank you very much. Still available for others if they want to meet, just let me know. Taylor has got some, switching subjects here, Taylor's got some pretty cool graphics to show you. We brought some printouts, more for, you can kind of gander at it. You can certainly get up during the meeting and take a look at them. Or as you walk out. But we've been building this new zoning code, kind of this draft code, and one of the best ways to look at the code is look at it, how it changes our zoning map. And so Taylor has drafted, well, not drafted our current map, but he has a kind of an A and a B. Here's our current zoning map, how it looks. If we do some of the recommendations, again, none of this is law yet, this is all being thought out, how would our zoning map change? How would it look? And I really want to just plant that seed. There's a lot more into it that we could start going into bulk standards and all that stuff. I don't want to go there yet. I think a work session would be the best way to handle the deep dive. But get your first blush, kind of like we did with the uses table, right? What do you see in here? Ask the question, why did A and B, why are A and B different? What might that mean? And let's just have that kind of dialogue. And again, if you want to look at it on a hard copy, certainly you're free to get up from your desk and take a look at the hard copy, but Taylor's going to put it on the screen as well. And then when we get into really detailed questions about how the exact code might be written for a certain district, I think that's a discussion for another day, probably under a work session.
This actually, with this split screen here, works pretty well if somebody needs to get the larger scale. But I think with the cursor and going back and forth, this on the split screen here looks pretty good. But anybody's welcome to look at the paper large
We
scale.
can send PDFs to you. This is just our first version, so taking
I
all
like the large font size too. I mean, that helps at my stage of the life. So yeah, I appreciate that.
We're in June now. We've been working all year on getting input from the commission, developers, council, stakeholders, et cetera. This is on what zoning districts are. Do we want to keep, change, add? So this is our first go at it of taking, we have our current version on the left side. So this is that the windmill rezoning even on here, approved last night at council, its third reading, and what a potential future could look like. Really the methodology for this was taking, we created some new zoning districts for those that auto corridor district, for instance. Some of the, we have some of the different ag districts, some districts which aren't going to be used until we get a proposal, conservation subdivision, for instance. But taking those, identifying properties that would fit into these new use categories and changing them. Another major item that wasn't discussed in depth during our input sessions, but staff feels is a good step forward, is actually taking parks and creating a zoning district for that. We did used to have a parks zoning district. It was, I'm not sure why it wasn't fully utilized, but this does a couple things. It takes what the city of Bettendorf's public parks, which we actually identify for park use, and creates a zoning district for them and applies, permitted uses in them and accessory uses as well. So we have Palmer Grill and Palmer Hills Park golf course. We also have private parks like Crow Valley, parts of Crow Valley, Hidden Hills, and Sunrise Golf Course. So these kind of, all those uses that occur there would fall under that zoning district. And this could be expanded upon. This is kind of what we're proposing right now. But I don't think it's the intention for the city owns a lot of outlots throughout or just land throughout the city. And I don't think it's our intention to be approving for large assemblies and, alcohol use and, barbecues there necessarily. And the same goes maybe with private parks or outlots that you have in HOA subdivisions as well. So it's kind of a lot of cities have this for establishing their regulations in their park land throughout the city, private or public. So you see some more green on the map.
I think a good example, just to let that sink in a little bit, is Palmer Hills, public golf course. It's actually zoned residential with a little chunk that's zoned commercial, so you can have the restaurant and the bar service.
Yeah, it looks like a little appendix laying down there. I mean, it's just,
So,
Yeah.
we could probably do better than that, I would say, and that's what we're aiming for here. And also because parks now, as we are learning, have so many new kinds of uses, and there's so many uses within parks, whether it's performance areas for music. You have parks that have action activities like zip lines and things like that, and we could collect those uses, deck hockey, and collect those uses and put them in parks of certain sizes, and just like we do with any other zoning district, would work the same way. Because a park just isn't a bench and a playground anymore, right? And we are kind of bumping our head against that, just looking at Palmer, for example. It's not residential property. And that zoning, if you zoom in and look at it, it's silly. So we can do better.
Some other highlights from the first version I'd point out are we had a light industrial district, which was really underutilized. We had two areas of town that utilized that district. That was our public works, where the community development's based out of. And then we also had an area just south of on the very eastern border of town, but it's actually south of the developed area there, in between Pleasant Harbor and where the former Nerd Speak used to be. So you have a transitional area between residential and some contractor uses, outdoor and industrial uses. So that new district, which we're calling technology manufacturing at this moment, it's really what that is. It's a transitional use for minimal impact, maybe indoor storage, contractor condos, other items that would not have a significant or little impact on neighboring either residential or commercial uses, but are really going to be, we're not going to want those uses to necessarily take up, from an economic development standpoint, our high thoroughfare, front street areas of town. So I think, again, storage, it's a thing that has really come across a lot from the discussion with developers. There's a demand for it. Where do we put that? We don't want it in our downtown right on Grant Street. We don't want it on front Forest Grove Drive, right where we built a roundabout. So there's those that's where the zoning powers come into play, and finding areas where that makes sense and fits. So you see that, and another area would be there's indoor storage right south of or north of Crawford.
Can I pause you just for a second and
Go
ask you a
ahead,
question about that? So in the as-is and the would-be, if we had a park zoning, would you envision having any park zoning where there's not currently parks?
Remember, zoning is where we have the future land use map, which I brought a copy up. That's where we the vision, the very high level policy goals for the city. The zoning map is what is law. So that is where we have things now. It's not if we had an idea of, if we were building a park right now, maybe that might be appropriate. But the parks zoning is current law. That's where and that's where all those regulations get enforced. So this is the now. The zoning is the now, while the future land use is a possible future. Now, when a petitioner or the city comes in and says, "Hey, we want to put a park here," they'll have to ask for it, because there are impacts from certain types of park uses that might be considered, and that'd be under a rezoning or site plan, or rezoning first. And those impacts can be for traffic, for lights, for all these things that we really haven't had to consider until some of these new uses are coming up.
So say, for example, we have this buyout area in the floodplain along Duck Creek near I-74. And it's likely the city's gonna want to designate that a park in the future. Kind of the only thing it can be because of some of the FEMA controls in the buyout area. So the future land use, we check the map, and lo and behold, it's probably gonna allow a park designation based on that future land use. And then we would rezone it to a park, and that rezoning would take those buyout areas and they would become park, and then there would be certain uses allowed in parks, maybe parks of certain sizes. Of course, we have some other controls just because of the FEMA aspect of that situation, but that park then would be zoned as a park and have allowable uses, maybe special uses, just like any
Right,
other zoning
yeah,
district,
okay,
right? So
yeah.
maybe some parks it's okay to have loud music in a concert pavilion. Maybe other parks it isn't. And that's really not clear in our code right now. And like I said, parks are so much more than a bench and a swing set nowadays, that we think that just as we've talked through this at our desks or at our offices, that makes a lot of sense to us. You are welcome to disagree. We're just telling you it's kind of striking us as we move through this process. Then we didn't see it early on, so we're bringing it back to you now.
Yeah, no,
And
makes
right now,
sense.
our parks are zoned anywhere from R1, R2, A1. I think we had some zoned industrial down off Pigeon Creek. So they're all over the place. I think it really makes it, the zoning is a good lever for the city to use to implement their regulations. And this makes it, I think, a lot of sense from outline what we deem as parkland, public. And then there are private parks, and I think we'll have to have further discussion on what, where's that threshold lie and what's the, how far. I think golf courses make a lot of sense because they have the current golf courses I mentioned have built-in amenities that you have bar, restaurant, I believe in all three, in the city of Bettendorf. I don't know if Hidden Hills does, but they have at least a bar. So some of these uses that are going to be allowed, but now if somebody, just put a park in their backyard and started having the whole city over, how do we stop that currently? I don't know if there's a really good method for that. So it's a balance.
I guess I would say it makes sense, just looking at and thinking about, say, City of Chicago map. You can clearly identify where parks are and how they help establish the flow of the city. You all and city parks are going to want to, as we grow north, establish locations, and having that clearly stated on the new map it's much easier to understand at least how they are relationally to everybody and every other aspect of the city, right?
I agree, yeah.
And I think the homeowner, home buyer, landowner, if you're living next to an area and it's got a future land use, people don't know about that, right? But they know they more frequently know what the zoning is. And if it's zoned to park, you have a certain expectation. It's not permanent. Nothing in the world is permanent, but you have a certain expectation of what's going to happen there. And I think that's, if you look at our zoning map and you're going to move next to Palmer, it looks like is that going to turn into residential someday? Well, no, it's not. It's a park. So.
But right now Palmer is zoned residential, so.
Yeah. So I think it's just more clear to our customer. I mean, bottom line.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and I don't know if I can articulate it clearly. You think back to the development that's underway right now at the corner of Devil's Glen and Forest Grove. There was a baseball field there that was privately owned property, but in our plan, it showed as a park. And so when that development was going in, the neighbors who weren't happy about it used that park designation as leverage to argue against that. So now we've gone, in the new plan, Hidden Hills is designated as a park.
And this is just the first version preliminary,
Okay,
so.
I mean,
No, but
you see where I'm
I know,
going?
finish the
It's
thought because this is
privately
important.
owned.
Yeah.
They could do whatever they wanted to out there.
Yeah. So I
They could
think,
put in estate homes or anything.
Is there a way to designate public park versus private park?
And we
Different shade
could,
of green or something like that.
we could do the zoning and only zone public parks, you know, that could be a zoning category and establish
Two
uses
different
related to
categories.
those.
That's what I mean, yeah, but
But
I mean,
I think that's such a really good point. And it's kind of like the original sin of our previous comp plan and our previous future land use
You
map,
have
right?
to learn from those,
That
right?
was a poster child.
Right.
But the thing I would point out, and you know this, is that it was never zoned park purposefully, and the owner never didn't request. And of course, we didn't have park zoning then, but it stayed zoned. Let me say that differently. It stayed zoned commercial because the owner knew it wasn't going to be a park, so they didn't change the zoning. Now, that still begs the question: could somebody have a large area that they have some type of assembly activity on, camping, RV parking, or something that meets code but feels like a park, looks like a park, but isn't zoned a park? Yeah, I guess they could. I think I still like, and I'm not totally convinced, I still like having that tool and having parks and knowing what uses are allowed in parks.
So I'm just thinking about Monk's Road. I'm looking here. We have a golf course there. I mean, could the same thing happen? Is that green?
Yep, yeah.
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 I mean,
Right, yeah.
what currently, so I believe Monks Road was mentioned, so that's Sunrise.
Sunrise and Hidden Hills are
That's,
the two big
that's zoned
questions.
agricultural right now. There's no
Okay.
agricultural uses occurring on that property. They would be required to rezone it for any upzoning,
change.
any change.
Okay.
Identifying it as its current use, and it fits in that use category, is identifying its existing use. We're not saying you are going to be a park, we're saying you are a park. We are making it a conforming zoning district. The same thing goes with Hidden Hills. Hidden Hills has a lot of more interesting history. You'll notice on the left-hand screen there is commercial and residential and even farther east industrial there. Those were rezoned in the 1970s and 1980s, and we have just, I guess, accepted the fact that it's okay to leave them there, even though they're totally incongruent with the current uses occurring there. And there is some danger to leaving those on the map, because this is the zoning power, the power that the city has. Someone could, prematurely, we'll say, submit a plan and go straight to a site plan or straight to a plat, and there's a lot less, there's no zoning, a lot less zoning power. That's your quasi-judicial powers. And you get into the zoning, that's more your legislative powers. So I think it's important to keep our zoning map accurate and not just accumulate the past unfinished projects, et cetera.
Just leave it there.
Yeah, and it's not even accurate to the property lines, and you could get into into the weeds that a partially zoned property isn't really, you can't really have two zoning districts on, one lot. What is it? Is it commercial or is it residential? So there's a lot of
Spin the
gray
wheel.
area
Spin the
there.
wheel.
so is there something that needs to happen with the code that says if a project isn't moved forward in the next X number of years, then it reverts back to?
With site plans, we're definitely including that. With zoning, I don't think we would do that. I mean, I think we could always rezone. Cities can petition to rezone property. So if there's stagnantly zoned property, to make up a term, we could petition to rezone it.
So then in the case of that north of the interstate, that would have been something the city should have taken up, and that just was a blind spot.
Yeah, and so I think what Taylor's suggesting, and again, all suggestions right now, none of this is law, this is just us thinking out loud, just for anybody watching at home, is do we try to make our map, the parks is a great issue, zone as close to the existing uses that are there. So no one's getting changed, right? If you're a park, if you're a golf course, you're still zoned a park and a golf course. If you don't want to be that someday, there's a process to change that zoning. That doesn't go away. Does that answer your question, Corey?
Kind of, I guess. I'm just seeing the big blotch of red.
Yeah,
thinking,
and so
why is it there, right?
Yeah, I think that would be one that we would look at as the city's power to rezone. We are allowed to be petitioned to rezone. That might be one we
We
rezone.
want to work with, and the highest, the methodology for this was not to take zoning away from properties. It's to transfer them to the correct classification for the 99% of the city. That one does stand out. We'll be reaching out to these landowners, of course. This is just the first step of the process, and it's gonna be a long one. And we have just layers and layers and layers of history, of historical cases. We're talking 1970s. This was barely, the development was south of, 53rd then. So I think we want to watch how we can protect the city's best interest and use of, services and planning in the future. And this is one option there, but this is just the first version, yeah.
I do have one other question. Sorry to cut everybody off.
Oh, go ahead.
Functionally, what's the difference between a private golf course and the Betplex? Why is one a park and the other not?
Yeah.
So the Betplex, that could be looked at too, and we're kind of running into that with some of the developments that are being proposed on the east Betplex. We'll call it the Iron T area. You'll notice the bright pink area is a regional entertainment district. It was really developed for the casino and for something like a major draw of tourism like the Betplex. On the east side, it's red. That was at the behest of the applicant, I believe, just because of the uncertainty of all the uses there. It's panned out now that we have the golf course, we have the services that are, the commercial services that would be fine in the C7 district. I think there was just a little fear of having to
medical
rezone and
facility?
rezone and rezone and rezone.
Yeah.
That, maybe a C7 district wouldn't allow a gas station or something like that. I don't know. It did actually, but.
I think that's a good question and a good answer, Taylor. But remember, we have zoning districts and uses aren't only in one district, right? So you could have some commercial uses that are fit in industrial. You have some commercial uses that fit maybe in a R3 residential, like a mom and pop grocery shop or something, right? And so parks seems to dominate all our conversation right now. But you could have some uses that are park-like, but those uses may not also, those uses may also be in other districts, like an entertainment district, like a C7. So a ball field, right? You could have a ball field in a park. You could have a ball field in a C7 district. Now, maybe in my mind, the C7 district, the outdoor entertainment district, or whatever the right term is, that's the one with the stadium and the lights and the, minor league baseball type of feel, right? Versus a park where it's maybe youth sports oriented and a little less impact. Those are the type of things we can parse out in the code. But remember, uses can be in multiple zoning districts, and there are some park-like uses and there are some commercial-like uses that might be okay in parks, and they might be okay in other districts as well. All of these things can be parsed out.
Well, that's a good point to bring up, yeah.
I'd just like to make a comment. First of all, I'm going to try to bring it all together here from Ann's original question or point you were making about someone thinking they're building a house next to a park that's not really a park because it's privately owned and it disappears suddenly and up goes a restaurant. That's a business. We have different things. Sunrise is a business. The golf course north of the interstate's a business.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, a business is commercial. So we don't want to put green on the map at all and have somebody later say, hey, that was a park and I just built my house there. In my opinion,
that's
we
a
should
good
not
point.
do that.
If I might expand on that, and that's exactly what I was thinking. I think there's a danger here to overcomplicate something that's really simple.
Okay.
Private is private. And if there was such an era at the end of Dells Glen,
There was.
any documents, city document or public document that has park used in a term that could be misinterpreted needs to be purged and cleaned up, because private is private, public is public. And to me, the idea of parks and the zoning, it's an absolute no-brainer. No downside, it's all upside. I think it's a brilliant idea.
But maybe you're saying, as a commission, you're thinking that privately operated recreational facilities that are park-like are maybe more like our C7 TBK sports complex, and that is a more accurate way to represent that to the public. So when they move next to something that is a higher impact than we might imagine the typical park uses, okay, I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
I would say I'm okay with the green, but maybe it is all public green,
Maybe it's a
right?
different green.
In order to be
Yeah.
a different.
Or it's public parks are green,
Differentiate it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, those private golf courses are, like I said, 3 different zoning districts. It's kind of in
I
La La
mean,
Land.
But they shouldn't be green is really what we're saying.
Green or
Well,
maybe-
whatever, they shouldn't be
Province,
green.
province.
I think,
Palmer
yes.
Hills, Palmer Hills ought to be green.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be
City
some yellow with a
It is.
pink something or other on there. No, I
Okay.
know.
Map that guy.
Yeah.
I think that's really good input, and that
That
hits
helps.
home for us.
Yeah.
Another thing, Taylor, I don't know where you're going because it's kind of his slideshow, but
This is it.
another thing, for example, is for mobile home parks. We have 3 mobile home parks in the city, 4. None of them are zoned mobile home park. And so,
Well, that's a
to me, that makes my head hurt. Like, we can fix this, right?
We make all this regulations for mobile home parks and we update them with the state code that has a lot of preempted mobile home park regulations, but none of our mobile home parks are zoned.
So it's like, in Mark terminology, like walks like a duck, talks like a duck. Let's call it a duck.
Can we change that now?
Well, that's what, that's
it's
the
shown
point I'm
on-
trying to make. That is the, well, we're seeing some errors in our methodology. I think they're fine tunings, but that's what I'm trying to say is like, if it says mobile home park on the map and you drive there and it's not a mobile home park, or it says park on the map and you drive there and it's not a park, that just makes my head hurt. And we can fix that. And that's what we're trying to do.
That
right?
was a change on the right-hand side. Your 4 are down there off of Devil's Glen, and the far east one is off of Valley Drive. And then we actually have the design regulations that, we have and they're mostly, we've been using those kind of, I guess, I don't know how we've been, it's been interesting how we, implement these regulations to a mobile home park that's zoned agricultural or zoned, C3, which is our most intensive commercial district. It can get into some unintended consequences, Well, it's unintended if the petitioner wants, the owner does have the right to, propose whatever. We just need, it's unplanned. That's all it is.
And I would say also, again, these are suggestions, and if people have real hesitations about, a certain perceived property being rezoned that they own or whatever, for these big, large parcels, we're gonna go reach out to those people and talk to them. So this is an open discussion right now, not a final document. Just draft is such the term I want to put out there.
The last point I'll make is we had talked about, and this is going to be a discussion we'll have in much more detail during a work session, but we had talked about really simplifying our residential districts, our single family specifically. So you'll see that we have multiple yellows on the left-hand side and a lot of formerly, we just went through an A2 zoning, which the house, it has sewer connection, it has water connection, it has access to a public road. So some of those changes were made to those subdivisions, like Surrey Heights, you'll see on the left-hand side is right next to their Crow Creek Road, and Middle Road is all A2. None of the houses in there are conforming in an A2 district because they're all the same size as a single-family residential lot. That makes a lot of sense, but we still have a lot of work to do in trying to figure out some of those bulk standards across the board, and that might be multiple districts still. It's going to be very hard to find. So we're doing that work, and we're going to discuss that further. But right now, we just have it all as yellow. That's just a snapshot in time. So work to be done, and then you'll see the downtown area has that overlay district. I think we are still recommending pushing for a more simplified form-based district for that area. It does have that underlying zoning that's existed since the 1970s and 80s and onwards, but really want to let downtown have a more those business owners to come forward with a building that fits downtown, or the use is less important as long as that building kind of fits to the form in our downtown master plan. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else.
I think your input was great tonight. It's going to help us a lot.
Yep.
The next step, and I want to plant the seed, is we need a work session to
Agreed.
take the next step, and we look at how we combine the R1, R2 zoning districts. If that's what we still want to do, again, this is all thought exercise, and there are some details that we really need to go through. Hard to discuss in this format. I think a work session format would be the way to do that.
Totally agree, yeah. I like all the effort. One of the things, and I'm graphical, is you can kind of see, flip back and forth, just the combination of the colors. And I had the benefit of seeing some of the non-conforming, you can highlight on a map by, lot sizes or whatever criteria you're looking at, Where do you have non-conforming, and what does making a dial on the, turning the knob on the dial change that? And that will be very eye-opening, I think, for the group to kind of see how we can fix some of the other things that we're off on a little bit. So I think a work session would be a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And our goal is really to make, it's no good to have a zoning ordinance that when 90% of the lots in the city the uses are non-conforming or the sizes are non-conforming. So we're really trying to update this ordinance to make as much as possible conforming within the new parameters that we set, so.
Yeah, good. A lot of work gone into it. I know that, appreciate that. And back to your comment about meeting with us, I think that was a great idea from all sides. So appreciate you taking the effort to do that. And staff, I think you guys do an awesome job and stay connected with us, and that helps all our dynamics. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we are adjourned.